tariffs would not have to be so large that they would discourage trade, but they would collect enough revenue to pay our expenses of our federal government. We are nowhere near the point where we could do that today. If we had to pay all of our federal budget, or even half of our federal budget, or even a quarter or an eighth of our federal budget with tariffs, those tariffs would be so large as to essentially choke off international trade. So we couldn't do that. But I like how you think. We got to be moving back in the direction where our federal government is small enough that we can survive that way. Yes?
You talked a lot about the court system and the activist judges and pushing towards more control by the federal government. And if I understand correctly, there's only been a handful of federal judges ever that have been impeached because Congress does have the right to do that. But I think all but one or two of those were judges in the South during the Civil War that stayed with that were on the South side, and the other couple were because of felonies. And so, where do you stand with Congress impeaching activist judges?
Yeah. Well, I don't know what I would say it's a small handful. We do impeach federal judges from time to time, but like you say, usually it's because they're getting bribed or they're committing some felony offense. I like the idea of impeaching people, impeaching jurists who fail to adhere to the most basic components of the U.S. Constitution, who fail to abide even by the obligation to recognize that the fundamental role of the government has to do with protecting life, liberty, and property. So much to the point that they would say that, oh yeah, the Constitution forbids states from prohibiting infanticide. You know, I think something like that probably should be cause for impeachment. I don't know that we'll get to that point anytime soon where that will be a viable option. There's a part of me that is scared by that because there are those in Congress right now that if you dusted off the impeachment power and they said let's start impeaching Supreme Court justices, they'd start setting their sights on Clarence Thomas, who, by the way, Clarence Thomas, along with my former boss, Justice Alito, I believe are two of the finest justices ever to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas in particular, I like to focus on him. He's served longer, so he's got more of a track record that we can point to, where he's had an opportunity to weigh in on the Constitution. I want to be the Clarence Thomas of the U.S. Senate. And what I mean by that is, Clarence Thomas never flinches from dissenting, from writing an opinion where he believes his colleagues have departed from the text of this document. I don't always agree with him. I agree with him most of the time. But even where I don't agree with him, I respect his commitment to the text and to the history, the original understanding of the Constitution. He will never flinch from that. I would worry that they would start attacking him, because that's where they would go. Because the liberal, progressive, racists, frankly, in Washington, can't tolerate the idea of a black man who is a conservative. And that's ultimately a racist principle. Yes?
I have two questions for you, Mike. On your income tax proposal, why would you not want to abolish the 16th Amendment on the sales tax proposal?
You would.
If you don't,
I forgot to mention that. Yeah.
If you don't, you're going to get both.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. In case you couldn't hear him, he asked why wouldn't you abolish the 16th Amendment with the national sales tax plan. I appreciate you pointing that out. That is an essential component of it. You would not only want to, you would pretty much have to abolish the 16th Amendment with that. You wouldn't want Congress, as I think President Obama probably wants to do, to establish a new tax in the form of a national sales tax and still cling to the income tax authority. So you want to get rid of the 16th Amendment in the same mode. Did you have another
Yeah,
point?
the other question I have for you, along the lines of judicial reform, what is your thinking with Congress's power to restrict the jurisdiction of the judiciary?
Yep.
Or abolish district courts such as the circuit court of the Ninth Circuit, for example?
Yep. The question he's referring to has to do with the Congress has the power, consistent with Article 3 of the Constitution, to limit the jurisdiction of the courts. Specifically, a lot of times it comes up in the context of limiting the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court of the United States. So Congress could, if it wanted, for example, say the Supreme Court no longer has jurisdiction to hear abortion cases. If it wanted to do that, it could do that, and that law would be constitutional. You can make some strong arguments of cases where they ought to do that. I'm not sure abortion is one of them right now. My fear would be if you did that with abortion right now, the state courts would continue to consider themselves bound by prior pronouncements under Roe versus Wade and its progeny, and those would be frozen in time that we could never get out from under them. I actually believe the Supreme Court is slowly moving toward the right on abortion jurisprudence. With the addition of Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Alito a couple of years ago, we now have 4 true solid conservatives: Alito, Roberts, Scalia, and Thomas. Whereas we only had 2 or 3 before, when we had Rehnquist and O'Connor there. I guess he had 3. Rehnquist was fairly conservative. When that happened, all of a sudden Anthony Kennedy started behaving more like a conservative. I don't yet know what Justice Sotomayor might do. I have an inkling that she's not going to be strong in that area, but I find some comfort in the fact that I'm told she's a devout Catholic. I'm hoping that her Catholicism might lead her in the direction of textualism, at least when it comes to abortion. So I wouldn't necessarily want to do that in that area, but there are lots of other areas where we might want to do that. We can talk more about that afterwards. But I think that's a great suggestion. Congress always ought to be looking at ways to do that. And it could do that. I think another good area where they ought to consider doing that with some certain types of death penalty appeals. I think they could consider doing that. Although I don't know that politically you'd ever make it that far. And I think in well, let's talk more about that afterwards. I'm going to put everybody to sleep if we go too long on that. Yes, ma'am.
So if we elect you, you'll be a junior senator, so I wanted to know what is your plan to get, I like all your platforms, how are you going to get them passed in 60 vote majority when everybody just wants to fight?
Yeah.
Answer to their constituents.
Good question.
You gotta get in front of the camera.
What's that?
You gotta get in front of the camera.
Yes, yes. Even though I have a face for radio, I don't know why. You know, this question comes up from time to time. It's an interesting one. There are a couple of components to it. The first relates to an argument that I want to prepare everyone for. An argument you're going to be hearing a lot of in the next few months. You're going to be hearing a lot of them from one of our senators, who's taller than I am, has even less hair than I do, whose father was also a senator. That senator will be making an argument to you over and over again along the lines of the fall. I heard him make this argument as recently as Saturday when we had a little debate in Bountiful. The argument, in essence, says you can't hand this over to a rookie right now. Another way of putting the argument, a truthful way of putting the argument, would be to say, yes, we live in a republic, and yes, as citizens in a republic, you have the right to elect whomever you want. You have the right to replace me, the 3-term incumbent senator, with someone else. But if you do, you will lose power. You will pay. You will pay severely. You will regret the day you replace me, because I am powerful. The rookie is not. You'll hear that argument over and over and over again. It may not be quite that bold, but the argument will be basically that. I want everybody to recognize that argument for what it is, which is a fundamental, full-throated assault on the Republican form of government. We either have the right to vote or we don't. If our seniority system in Washington has such a chokehold on freedom and liberty that we can't exercise our right to vote without losing power, something about that system has to change. And I think we should all be prepared to dismiss that argument for the red herring that it is, for the assault on individual liberty that it is, for the assault on the fundamental right to vote that it is. So dismiss that outright. There is some truth to it in the sense that the system has evolved to